what is peak oil?
Well, depending on exactly who you talk to, it can either be we've been originally endowed with say 2 trillion, 3 trillion barrels of oil, and when we use up half of that, at that point, and production will peak and then go into terminal decline. And no matter how much technology or money or investment you throw at the problem, each successive year, the rate of decline just gets progressively, more severe, and essentially goes until you get down to a very minuscule amount, and then it begins to level off at about, I believe, just under 10%. Exacerbating that problem, as I understand it, importing countries will necessarily, as soon as the situation or the price of oil goes up, and the exporters will begin to cannibalize their own resource or save it for future, husband it, and exports or imports for the importing countries will decline much more rapidly than the exporting countries themselves, or even the peak. So that's the rate of decline goes down even further for importing countries, just for the simple fact that they're dependent on the exports, which are the countries themselves, which makes total sense for the exporting nations. And a number of other things can exacerbate the situation. Scarce resources usually can breed conflict. And some of the responses can further diminish the problem or diminish the resource, some of the solutions, because alternatives tend to, like say solar panels or nuclear, there's an incredible amount of energy that goes into either mining the materials for solar panels or producing nuclear power. So further exacerbating the problem. Peak oil, it's a geological problem and a political. I guess for me, I didn't quite understand that at first. It's the geology involved is physical constraints, but then there's the simple fact that it's the rate of extraction is heavily influenced by international relations and intra-national relations.
I guess just to add to that, or to pull out one other piece, it's the point at which the availability of, I guess, supply, that demand exceeds supply, and that any additional oil going to any one nation means that some other nation has to get less. It's that point at which the continued increase in access to oil ends, and there's a dramatic decrease in access, especially if, as you say, if nations start hoarding oil, then access to oil is going to diminish precipitously. The other aspect is that the amount of energy it takes to get that oil out of the ground, and that may be it's hard to tell which point things are going to peak, but where you actually have to use as much oil or energy to get the oil out of the ground as the energy is worth of the oil that you're extracting. So you've basically got a zero-sum game, and that may be the point when things peak. So there's different aspects to it. Maybe Phil has some other things to add.
I think the previous two speakers spoke eloquently enough, insofar as basically the peak point occurs when the demand exceeds the amount of oil that you're able to pull out of the ground. And like Tom just said, when you have something like the tar sands, which is talked about a lot, yes, there's oil in the tar sands, but how much energy are you willing to impart to extract that oil, to get at it, to produce it for actual useful content? It gets to the tipping point to where the cost per barrel has to go up. You have no choice in the matter, because the amount of cheap oil is no longer available, and that's the tipping point. That's the peak area. The other problem has to do, which you already mentioned briefly, has to do with the developing countries. Countries want to have the same development scale that the United States has and other developed countries have. And as countries like Bangladesh and India and China want to develop at the same rate that we are, and they are finding new sources of income, and they try to develop at the same rate as we are, the demand on the existing supply goes up. And yet the amount of oil that's being discovered is not going up. Therefore, we are fast approaching our peak, if not already past it.